Good morning, everyone. This is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and it is another day of Coffee and MTG. Let's have some great Magic discussion today, and we are going to be in for some amazing Magic discussion because we have got a very special guest, a master of Ad Nauseam is coming onto the show today, people. Make sure you've got your Ad Nauseam questions ready. You know we love the conversation, the Q&A. Whether you want to play Ad Nauseam or you want to know how to play against Ad Nauseam, what are the best cards, what are the worst cards, get them ready because we've got the Ad Nauseam master on the show today. So brew up your cup of coffee, whether it's the morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, brew up your cup of Magic and let's have a fantastic discussion of Magic the Gathering today. So yes, my special guest today is a master of Ad Nauseam. Perhaps the single reason why Ad Nauseam is back on the map. We all remember when humans came by and then all of a sudden Ad Nauseam just disappeared almost overnight and now has risen back as a phoenix. I would love to thank my special guest today, Ryan Donkin. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah, we all have to be ready with our coffee. Finally, we have two coffees on Coffee and MTG.
Love that.
How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm so good. I'm having a great morning so far.
And also Ad Nauseam's doing great. So so tons of reasons why you should be pretty excited right now. So for anyone who's never met you before, never heard of you, basically who are you and why are you the master of Ad Nauseam?
All right, great. So I'm Ryan. I pretty much play, when it comes to competitive Magic, I pretty much exclusively play Ad Nauseam. I've queued for 2 PTs with Ad Nauseam.
Mm-hmm.
I queue with Ad Naus. I've day 2'd a GP. And I day 2'd a team SCG, and my personal record was 13-1 back with Phoenix.
That's a pretty good win percentage.
Yeah, that was great. I've been streaming Modern Supers since back in June, and my overall record for Modern Supers was averaging 24th place, which is pretty good when it's 200%. So
there's a little feedback on your side, I think. I don't know how or why it's happening. Do you have a speaker on?
That's weird. No. Got headphones.
Oh, let's just I'll try to do my best not to speak too loudly then. It's all good. It's all good. Continue.
Okay, so yeah, that's about it for the accolades. As far as Ad Nauseam is concerned, just pretty consistently putting some results out there with the deck. I try to make a lot of content too. Oh, one more thing. I won the Modern Team Lotus Box event. They had their season 1 invitational thing. I won their Modern 1K basically, which was pretty cool.
Gotcha. And I see on MTG Goldfish you've got you have very impressive finishes in the recent very recent history in 2020. Modern Premier event 8-1, Modern Premier event 8-1, 7-1 in a super qualifier, and just recently a 5-0 finish. And you're telling me just last night you went 4-1. So
in the prelim, yeah.
Yeah, so very, very strong results in very recent history. And so now I'd love to ask you, what happened to Ad Nauseam? Why did it fall off the map? I just remember, and I don't know if it's exactly because of humans or what humans did to the metagame, but humans came out in basically 2017, and Ad Nauseam just slowly disappeared and as far as I'm concerned from the community, was rendered unplayable. And now Ad Nauseam is back. So take us through, how or why this happened.
Right. So humans was definitely a huge issue for the deck. The hardest thing, the Ad Nauseam's worst matchups are decks that can provide pressure to the board and also interact with our strategy. So humans not only plays, an aggro. It's not only an aggro deck, but they're playing things like Thalia, which disrupt us. They're playing Meddling Mage as well, and Kitesail Freebooter to take.
That's a very good one, yeah.
So that deck definitely a huge issue. Also, Death Shadow was a really big issue as well. Again, here's another deck that can put really powerful creatures into play early and at the same time, they're just dissecting your hand. They're playing 1-mana negates, so very hard to deal with that as well. So because of those two decks, the deck, really started to go on the decline. And then Phoenix came out. Phoenix was an example of a really good linear deck that didn't do much interaction at all outside of Exit Charm. And then Hogak came out, and that was also an example of a really linear deck that didn't interact much at all. And Ad Nauseam had pretty good matchups against those. But what really made the deck come back, in my opinion, at least for 2020, was Lurrus. Lurrus, any deck playing Lurrus was almost... It was so good. So Jund was always a 50-50 matchup. Lurrus comes in, can't play Liliana anymore. That's
okay.
Burn,
the dynamic has changed.
Exactly, yeah. And then Burn decks became really popular with Lurrus, and that's a very good matchup for Ad Nauseam. Control decks were fitting Yorion into their plan, and now we're adding 20 extra cards, so we're less likely to see Force of Negation or Teferi Time Raveler. Those are the cards that give Ad Nauseam a hard time out of that deck. So those cards kind of fell to the wayside. Tier Escape Shift popped up for a little bit with Yorion. That's a really good matchup. So yeah, the meta really just got into a nice spot for Ad Nauseam to come back in a big way.
And also humans sort of shrunk a lot up until this point.
Oh, definitely.
Still relevant, but it would not like the top deck of the format as it used to be.
And I'd like to thank my good friend Lurrus for that as well, because buying Seal of Fires, it's really hard to play a deck full of 2/2s. So, yeah, kind of a perfect storm for this deck to come back.
True story. Yeah, so brew up your coffee and decks, boys. Good morning to Gills to pay the bills. Good morning, Kyle Nano. Good morning, Biggleman. And Gills to pay the bills loves these interviews. Everyone loves these. I've been called like, Nikachu, where's the master interviews anymore? And I'm like, I got no computer. Okay, but we got a computer now, so we're back to the interviews.
Yeah, I had a bunch of people in my community be like, dude, you should totally get on Nikachu's show. That would be so cool. That happened like a month ago. And then I'm like, I remember I reached out to you and you're like, my battery is swollen. I can't do anything or something.
Yeah, the laptop is dead. Like, yeah, the laptop's actually in the middle of being repaired right now. I don't even have it here, but yeah, we got a real computer right now. So still on the topic of metagame, Brewlander says Eldrazi seems like a horrible matchup for Ad Nauseam. E-Tron is everywhere right now. What is your take on the matchup against Eldrazi?
Yeah, that is a very skill testing matchup. Absolutely. There are a lot of different cards out of Eldrazi that can give Ad Nauseam a hard time. Karn the Great Creator, really tough to beat because Ad Nauseam plays artifacts to ramp to 6 mana on turn 4. Thought-Knot Seer, again, we have another card that not only provides pressure on the board, but it also disrupts the hand, which is kind of like what you need to beat Ad Nauseam in general. And then also Chalice of the Void.
That's not bad.
Yeah, can cause a lot of issues for the deck. So one thing I will say, pretty interesting development for Ad Nauseam at least. I'm going to shout out somebody. Dreams of Ashiok is one of the top E-Tron players in my mind at least. And they just 5-0'd the prelim that I 4-1'd last night. And they had 0 Chalice of the Void in their deck.
Right.
Pretty interesting. Like, here's a deck that is definitely very hard for us to beat, and they are cutting one of 3 cards that give us a hard time. So I'm kind of curious to see how that develops. It's definitely a really hard strategy to face. The best thing you can do is look at your opening 7 and then try to say, all right, if they Chalice on 0, how can I play? Does this hand have play? If they Chalice on 1, can my hand do anything? Do I have enough lands if they play Karn? Can I race a Karn because I'm on the play? Stuff like that. It's a very skill testing matchup for sure.
Here's a great question from Balada, who are not familiar with the interaction with Ad Nauseam. Is Chalice on 0 good against Ad Nauseam? What does Chalice on 0 do?
So Chalice on 0 is good against Ad Nauseam because Ad Nauseam plays Lotus Bloom. Lotus Bloom is one of the main ways that the deck goes from 3 to 6 mana on turn 4. And countering Lotus Bloom is very strong. The other 0 mana cost spell is Pact of Negation, but Pact of Negation doesn't. I'll give you a second.
That's okay. You go.
Yeah, Pact of Negation doesn't play a very big role in the matchup, but it does exist in game 1 at least. I would say Chalice on 0 is not the best way to spend your Chalice. I think Chalice on 1 is typically better because a lot of the cantrips like Serum Visions, Sleight of Hand, find the combo pieces. Also, Angel's Grace.
Yeah, Angel's Grace is like the main one.
Angel's Grace has split second, which means it can't be countered by spells, but it can be countered by triggered abilities, which is what Chalice of the Void has. It's very, very niche interaction. So that is one of our main combo pieces. Also, Spoils of the Vault, if you want to bring that up.
Yep.
Spoils of the Vault is one of the most powerful cards in our deck, and it also has a converted mana cost of 1. So Chalice on 0 is what I would do on the draw. If I was the E-Tron opponent, I was on the draw. I'm sorry. If I was the E-Tron opponent and I was on the play, I would not auto slam Chalice on 0. I would wait to see if they suspend any amount of Lotus Blooms, because if there are 1 to 2 Lotus Blooms, that might be a good use of your Chalice, especially if you have like a turn 2 play, or if you want to crack a map on turn 2 or something like that. But
the nice thing about Lotus Bloom is you get to see it coming.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
No point to just. I mean, the thing is 0 mana anyway. So I mean, unless I was so scared that you're going to play Thoughtseize.
I've definitely had E-Tron opponents just on the play in game 2 or 3 or whatever, just like start the game out with a Chalice on 0, and I think that's a mistake. You really got to wait and see. There's just like no reason to do that. So that's the only thing I would say. Okay,
so then in your opinion, why play this deck? Why are we playing Ad Nauseam?
Okay, so Ad Nauseam is just such a high to play. I absolutely love this deck. It's just great TV. You go all in. Like you play your 2 spells, and if you can't win the game that turn, you're gonna lose guaranteed. Your life total goes to a negative number. You're dead at the end of the turn, and that's like a personal reason to play. I love the thrill of it, like playing Spoils of the Vault and like putting my faith in the numbers.
Let's roll the dice.
Literally.
So still have a life total at the end of this.
Yeah, I did a Spoils of the Vault at 9 life last night to win a game in the prelim. That was crazy. But in terms of like competitive reasons to play, the deck is very consistent at what it does. You win, like you always have a good avenue to win on turn 4. They're in a constantly shifting metagame. Ad Nauseam is favored because people always fall back on what they know, like Burn and Tron and Dredge, linear strategies, and control decks or mid-range decks like Jund typically get a little worse when you in a constantly shifting metagame, in my opinion, because you can't really nail or like tune down your counter suite, tune down like, all right, how many discard spells do I want to play? Am I playing like this many assassin trophies? How many fatal push will I need? Things like that. So like Burn is always very popular in a new meta, and Ad Nauseam eats Burn for breakfast along with its coffee. So
that's right. And with that, I'm definitely going to take a delicious cup of coffee out of this.
Cheers. So I would say Ad Nauseam is a great deck to pick up if you like to win on turn 4, and you're expecting a lot of linear aggressive decks. Yeah.
So you're talking about how this is all in on a few key pieces. What are the key interactions to know, you think, for this deck?
So the combo is you need a white card in terms of like Angel's Grace or Phyrexian Life.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about Phyrexian Life too. Oops. And then you need Ad Nauseam to pick up your entire deck.
Yeah, so the whole idea is you need to put yourself in a situation where you can't lose the game. Because so Angel's Grace can do that. Phyrexian on Life.
Yeah, go ahead.
Coffee? Where'd you get coffee?
I made it. I'm gonna do it later.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I love you.
She can be part of it if she wants.
Yeah, that's my girlfriend. She's great. So I want to talk about Unlife for a second. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make playing against Ad Nauseam is they assume that, like, let's say I'm at like 2 life. If they attack for 12, I don't die, right?
Yeah.
Because the wording on Ad Nauseam is you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. And then the second part is the confusing part. As long as you have 0 or less life, all damage is dealt as though the source had infect.
That's right.
A big mistake people will make is that they will try to deal all the damage at once, and then I'll just go to -10, for example.
Okay.
Hey, catch you later. And that's a really key interaction, because if you can set yourself up to be at like 1 life right before the big swing versus 0 life right before the big swing, that's the difference between a whole nother turn.
Yes, absolutely.
And Angel's Grace works well with Unlife because Angel's Grace says your life total can't go less than 1. So it fogs an entire turn. Yeah. If damage reduces life total to 1, it reduces it to 1 instead.
And the reason we need to protect ourselves is for Ad Nauseam.
Exactly.
Which says, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost, but you can repeat this process any number of times. So the idea is once you're invincible, you just put the whole deck into your hand. And
yeah, and another thing is life loss is not damage. That is like one of the most basic things that you want to know when you pick up Ad Nauseam. So Phyrexian Unlife says damage is dealt as though it has infect. But Ad Nauseam is a loss of life. So even if you're at a negative life total with Unlife in play, you won't lose the game when you resolve your Naus. So there's that.
And what are the main ways of winning right now? It looks like there has been a shift to Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about Thassa's Oracle as well when it comes to key interactions.
Sure, let's go.
All right, so Thassa's Oracle says...
Was not printed for Merfolk, that's for sure.
When we talk about Merfolk, if we get to it, this card is a big part of the matchup. But so you look at the top X cards, and then if X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your deck, you win the game. So you can play Thassa's Oracle for just 2 mana to win the game, which is very easy to do in this deck once you pick up your library. Thanks to Simian Spirit Guide. You can use Simian Spirit Guide to play your Pentad Prisms to generate double blue. And also another interaction that not a lot of people know is the way Thassa's Oracle works with Spoils of the Vault. So with Spoils of the Vault, you can name a card and reveal cards until you reveal the named one.
Is it Spoils from the vault?
Spoils of.
Spoils,
yeah. Yeah.
Here we go.
Right there. Yeah.
Okay.
So you name a card, reveal until you reveal the named card, exile the rest, and lose a bunch of life. So let's say we can't lose the game this turn because we've played one of our other combo pieces. If we name a card such as like, I don't know, Rookie Mistake or Easy Prey or Rest in Peace, we don't have any of those cards in our deck. So we exile our entire library. Then for just 2 mana, we can play a Thassa's Oracle and win the game that way as well. So it's like kind of a plan B way to end the game, which is very mana efficient as well.
It's an additional way to win the game that the former Laboratory Maniac, or could you do this with Laboratory Maniac or no?
Yep, you definitely could. So
cards. Oh yeah, you just wipe out the graveyard, but you need more. You need a cantrip at the end of it.
Yeah, you need a cantrip
and more mana to cast the thing.
Exactly. So now you have to do this in your upkeep. Go to your draw step to win the game. So you need the lab mana to stick an entire turn. And it's also 3 mana. So not only is it more mana efficient, it's like way more flexible. And Thassa's Oracle is just a more powerful card than Laboratory Maniac. It's like a 2 mana 1/3, which is good for our plan to get to turn 4. It digs deeper for our combo in a pinch. It's just such a huge upgrade for the deck.
So you very often will play this on turn 2.
Oh yeah. So when I want to play that on turn 2, I play that on turn 2 when I have a copious amount of mana. So if I look at my hand and I say I'm going to be able to make 6 or 7 mana by turn 4, then I'm probably playing at my Thassa's Oracle. As long as I don't have to play a Pentad Prism or a Phyrexian Unlife, of course. But usually you don't have those cards if you're trying to dig with Thassa's Oracle anyway. So Yeah.
Gotcha. So what do you say? What are the strengths of this deck? Oops. What are the strengths? And therefore, what do you think are the good matchups for Ad Nauseam?
Okay, so the strengths of this deck is very resilient to damage. So if you're playing against a deck that is very aggressive and linear, it's going to be very hard to kill Ad Nauseam because we're playing 4 cards that say, not only do you have to get me to 0, but you have to get me to 10 poison in order to win. And we play 4 cards that are basically like, I'm staying at 1 life, you can't get me any less. In addition, we have Pact of Negation, which is a 0 mana counterspell that we can use to get us to turn 4. So since Ad Nauseam is an instant, you can win the game in response to the Pact trigger. So it's just a 0 mana, I'm taking an extra turn. There are so many ways in this deck to get to turn 4. And once you get to turn 4, you're basically winning. So yeah, it's very good against decks that are just trying to kill you as quickly as possible. It's very good against decks that cannot present a clock that is reasonable. So like against like Scape Shift, for example, or Amulet Titan. Those decks are just like, I'm playing my 6/6 and getting at you, and then doing it again, and then I'm winning the game. Or I need to have 7 lands in play before I Scape Shift and kill you. Like, those strategies take time, and they also take a lot of resources to set up. So they're, instead of like making me discard cards or leaving up mana to counter my spells, they're spending their resources in ways that are like, hard to interact if you're like Jund or something. But I'm a linear combo deck. I don't need to interact. I just need to, as long as I get to turn 4, we're good. You know what I mean?
Right.
And yeah. So the strengths are against decks that don't interact with the hand or on the stack, and against linear decks that, basically decks that don't interact with the hand or on the stack. Very, very favored.
And I must say, this is easily one of the more, I would say, fair combo decks, because this is not, you don't feel like you're brutally losing on turn 2 or turn 3. Or at least it doesn't happen that often unless you have some super amazing hand.
Absolutely,
that involves like 3 Simian Spirit Guides.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like, it doesn't feel as oppressive as I sometimes get crushed by Amulet or Storm or something like that.
Yeah, like, not only is it a deck that only wins on turn 4, but it doesn't whiff. You know what I mean? It's not like you have to sit there and wait and be like, are they going to hit the Nourishing Shoal or not? Or are they going to have enough mana for Pass and Flames? It's like, once you play the white card and the Ad Nauseam, you pretty much know it's over. So you can get on to the next one. You can go get food from the vendor or whatever. It's not so bad. That's another reason I love the deck.
Good morning, Dexter Johnson. Good morning to everyone who's joining. Today we are here with Ryan Donkin, who's an Ad Nauseam master and is perhaps the sole reason why it's coming back. Ryan already has some results under his belt, pushing the deck, showing it's very playable right now for all the right reasons. And now we are unlocking the truth about Ad Nauseam in this wonderful interview. We're going to talk a little bit more about Ad Nauseam from Ryan, but I'm definitely going to go back and get to everybody's questions, so have them lined up.
I'd love that,
because we're definitely going to talk Ad Nauseam. Whether you want to know how to play Ad Nauseam or how to fight against it, I'm sure he's got the answers for you. So we just went over the strengths. Now, what are the weaknesses of this deck, and therefore what are the bad matchups for Ad Nauseam?
Absolutely. So the weakness, the biggest weakness of this deck is the hand. So Ad Nauseam is a 2-card combo that requires quite a bit of mana to do. And it's not really doing much of those cards until turn 4. So until turn 4, the cards in your hand are very vulnerable to discard effects. So Foxy's, Inquisition, those cards are very strong against Ad Nauseam. Additionally, the deck does not like to get interacted with on the stack. So cards like Force of Negation are very strong because, Force of Negation not only counters Ad Nauseam, but it does so for free. In the past, we can overload counterspells. Like our counterspell opponent will have like 4 mana available. They tap out for Cryptic Command, we Pact of Negation. They have nothing else to do. We win the game. Now that Force of Negation exists, it adds another layer of complexity, another layer of difficulty for Ad Nauseam. Additionally to that point, Teferi Time Raveler, a very disgusting card, absolutely disgusting, not only makes our Pact of Negation do nothing, but it also prevents Lotus Bloom from being cast. Since you have to cast Lotus Bloom in your upkeep due to the words on suspend, Teferi Time Raveler doesn't let you cast your Lotus Bloom. It just sits in exile, mocking you. It's the worst.
It's gone.
So, yeah, so TTR is really good against Pact of Negation and Lotus Bloom. So, yeah, decks that can interact with the hand and on the stack are very difficult. But at the same time, you need to apply some amount of pressure to that. So Death Shadow is the perfect example of a bad matchup. It's got Thought Seizes and it's got Death Shadows. Really hard matchup to beat. Humans, Kitesail Freebooter, interacting with the hand, taxing us, blah, blah, blah. Humans is a bad matchup because of the pressure. Bant Control or honestly, Bant Blade with Stoneforge Mystic, TTR, and like Force Negation, that's probably the worst control deck matchup possible for the deck. Because because you can
seems slow to me.
Well, it is slow, but you're putting in a Batterskull onto the battle. You're putting a Batterskull on the battlefield on like turn 3, or swinging in with a Feast of Famine sword on a Quaddle on like turn 3 or 4. And in order to overload the counter spells out of that deck, you need time. You need to draw like a couple packs, a couple Veil of Summers before you can safely execute the combo. And, Feast of Famine doesn't give you the time to build up a big hand because you have to discard a card every turn. Right. Batterskull can put you on like a 5-turn clock. You know what I mean? Against like Blue-White Miracles, for example, a Snapcaster Mage is like a 10-turn clock. Maybe maybe more even if you have an Unlife in play. So that's the kind of clock that we can beat. But Bant Blade is definitely the worst control deck matchup possible. Blue Moon is probably the best control deck matchup possible. Because it has that long, it doesn't have a clock and it doesn't have Teferi, basically. So
right.
If it can interact with the hand, especially, and secondly on the stack, it's going to be a tough matchup for Naus, especially if it can present a clock.
So would this be just one exception to these metrics, but is it also considered a bad matchup? Infect?
Yes.
It's just fast and just dodges Phyrexian on life. Doesn't even care, or doesn't even care about your Angel's Graces either.
And to that point, they also can play Spell Pierce and Dispel.
Oh, yeah, they do have some disruption.
And that's the part that makes it impossible. Like the Infect makes it a bad matchup, but sometimes you can squeak out a turn 4. Sometimes you can put an Oracle into play and get there, or you can get a nut draw and win on turn 3. But it's like if they have one Spell Pierce, it just all falls apart completely. So that's what makes it such a hard matchup.
Okay, yeah, still basically aggro deck with disruption.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think is the most common mistake people make when piloting Ad Nauseam?
Yeah, I thought about this question a little bit. I think the biggest takeaway I would want to give for someone who's just trying to pick up this deck is when you evaluate your 7-card opener, you need to make sure that this hand has a solid plan when it comes to winning on turn 4. Like if your opening hand is like Angel's Grace, Ad Nauseam, and like 5 lands, like you have the combo, but you're not going to be able to get it off by turn 4.
Yeah.
You really need a way to win on turn 4 with your opening 7. So that would be the biggest mistake that I see made. Like there's this one person in the Ad Nauseam Discord that's posting a lot of their like starting 7s trying to pick it up. And it's like, it's all about, keeping your opening 7. Another big thing, playing your mana early. So like if you have a Pentad Prism, you want to play that on turn 2 because it's going to tee you up to win on turn 4. It's all about turn 4 with this deck. So that's the biggest mistake is people don't think about it as like the goal isn't to pick up your deck and win the game. The goal is to win the game on turn 4, like specifically. That's the goal.
I'm just curious, was that always the case, or is that true more now in today's modern metagame than, say, 2015, 2014, 2015, where things were a lot slower back then? Or was it always the case? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can't speak too much to that because I started playing this deck in 2018.
Okay.
But to my knowledge, I think so, because Lotus Bloom comes off of Suspend on turn 4, and that's kind of like how it all really works. But to that point, Mystical Teachings used to be a card in Ad Nauseam, and that is definitely not the case anymore. And it was allowed to exist in the deck because of the slower metagame that you're citing. So I would say yes to a point. So
I know you've addressed this to the beginners, but I'm just curious if you would have any advice to people who are already pretty proficient with Ad Nauseam. What do you think are like a little bit more high-level mistakes that people are making that you could so that you can play better?
So it gets really like, I don't know. Spoils of the Vault is probably the most underrated card in the deck.
Okay.
And a lot of people do not play the card correctly. Like, what I do is I have a hypogeometric calculator, honestly, that I use to make sure I'm playing the card correctly. And like Spoils of the Vault on turn 1 for Lotus Bloom is honestly a winning line that a lot of people miss. Because if you're looking at your starting 7 and you're like, wow, if this Spoils of the Vault was a Lotus Bloom, I'd probably win this game. Just do it. Like, yeah, you can die. Just do it. Like, you're 80%. You're like 70 to 80% to not die. And if you do it and it wins you the game, then that kind of means you're 70, 80% to win the game if you play this spell. And a lot of people miss that. Like, I had a situation last night where my opponent has 9 power in play. I'm at 9 life, and I have a Spoils in hand. And I'm like, if I Spoils for Unlife, I'll win this game. But what's the chances that I just burn this Angel's Grace and top deck an Angel's Grace or an Unlife next turn? So I'm like, I've got 9 shots to get a 4 of versus 1 shot to get a 7 of. You know what I mean? And like, it came out to be like 56% to win if I play the Spoils versus 14% to win if I don't. So yes, I'm at 9 life, but that's enough. You know what I mean? So learning like the correct situations to use Spoils of the Vault is probably the best thing you can do to improve your play with Ad Nauseam.
You got to make a guide on it.
Yeah, I do have a sideboard guide on my Twitter. But for like the in-depth technical stuff like that, I just, there's so much and it's so specific. I just try to stream as often as I can to
so
give people the opportunity.
Get the ideas.
Yeah, to pick it up.
You know, do you have any advice about how to sequence your Scrylands and maybe Serum Visions versus Sleight of Hand? Because I have played against Ad Nauseam opponents, and then the Ad Nauseam crowd came up. I was at a GP, and then I beat some Ad Nauseam opponent, and then the Ad Nauseam crowd sort of came up and said, you know what, you could have gotten a card deeper if you did this. And so like there are cards and they're also damn different.
Yeah, that's kind of what makes it so interesting too. So the general consensus is you want to play your Scryland, you want to play your Sleight of Hand first.
Okay.
Especially on turn 1, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then after that, you want to play your Scrylands, like Temple of Deceit, for example. And then after that, you want to play your Serum Vision. And
interesting. In that order.
And that's like the flow chart. Yeah. I mean, situationally, you know, things can change. You know, every game has got a different state, but you're going to get the maximum amount of depth if you play them in this order. So the easiest example I can think of is, let's say you play a Temple of Deceit and you find a card you really want on top of your deck. So you're like, scry to the top, easy. Then you play Sleight of Hand. You're looking at a card you already wanted plus an extra card.
Right.
So if you just played the Sleight of Hand first, for example, you get the card you need, and play the Temple, and you can look at a fresh card. So in the first example, you're looking at the top card of your deck and then the top two. In the second example, you're looking at the top two cards of your deck, putting one in your hand, one on the bottom, and then you're looking at the third card of your deck.
Yeah.
So that gets you 3 looks.
Yeah, so here's 2 looks. Here's the third look.
Right, exactly. And then Serum Visions has scry 2, right? So if you draw a card and then scry 2, you're putting 2 cards on top of your deck. If you then play, and let's say you like one of them, if you then play a scry land, you're just looking at the same card.
Yeah, you just wasted time.
Yeah, so in this example, let's say you play the scry land first. You see the card, you like it. Let's say you don't like it. That's 1 card on the bottom. Then you play Serum Visions. Now you're looking at 3 cards. So that's 4. If you play the Serum first, you're only going to look at 3 if you like one of them. So there's that. And additionally, if you play the Scryland and you like it, you can immediately draw it with Serum Visions, which is also pretty good. Corner cases, if you absolutely need to find the card to win that turn, you kind of do it in like almost the reverse order. Like this is the greedy order. Yeah, so you Scryland first always.
Okay,
and then you Serum Visions because that gets you a draw. And then you scry both to the bottom. Like assume we scry everything to the bottom because we're looking for one specific card.
Yeah.
So Temple to the bottom, draw a card, scry 2 to the bottom, and then sleight of hand. That's like the desperation, like I need to get the card this turn mode. But a lot of Ad Nauseam is setting up for turn 4, right? So you don't mind scrying cards to the top with your Temple or your Serum. So you want to play it in the Sleight, Temple, Serum order because it's going to give you the maximum amount of looks, leaving the card on top, if that makes sense. And then another thing I'd like to say, sleight of hand on turn 1 is very good when you're looking for Lotus Bloom. So if your opening 7 has a sleight of hand and no Lotus Bloom, you can sleight of hand to give you 2 extra looks. That's 9 looks at a Lotus Bloom, which is much better than 7. So
right.
That's the reason why we play it first.
That was great. That was fantastic. If anyone learned something there, give a thumbs up to the video.
Hell yeah.
Next time I run into an Ad Nauseam opponent, I'll know very clearly. Like, I would not intuitively figure out that order. I would just sort of intuitively understand, sleight of hand before the Temple. But that's about it. That's as far as I go. Because if you Temple, put it on top. I can figure that out. But when Serum Visions, throwing that in there, I'm not sure how that interacts with all of that. And
that's like one of the reasons why I love this deck, because other decks care about getting on the board or what's my life total, how many, things like that. But Ad Nauseam, it's literally like tanking on how do I scry, which cantrip do I play first. It cares about those things more than like putting creatures in play, which is kind of cool to me.
So would you still say the most misplayed card might have been Spoils of the Vault?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Another thing that is also always a really interesting decision point is when to play Ad Nauseam for value. Like you can play just as a Magic card, not as a combo piece, but I
need to refill my hand and I got 15 life.
I need to refill my hand. Yeah, exactly like that. And knowing when that is correct can also be a challenge point. Though that's probably the 2 most difficult parts to the deck, but Spoils of the Vault is definitely the most the skill testing card of the deck, I would say, for sure.
Now I know there's not a lot, the deck is relatively stock, not a lot of change, but what do you think is the most underrated card of Ad Nauseam?
I would still say Spoils, honestly.
Okay.
When people think of Ad Nauseam, they're like, oh, why would I play that deck? I just play this one card and it kills me. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it normally doesn't go that way. It's almost like a 1-mana instant speed demonic tutor, a lot of the time.
And that's banned in Legacy.
So the card
is Demonic Consultation. Sorry, that's the correct card, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not a Legacy guy.
I'll look it up quickly. But continue.
Yeah. So Spoils of the Vault is super underrated.
Yeah, there's a 1 mana black tutor in Legacy called Demonic Consultation.
Oh
It's banned.
It's like exactly like
So
this.
this is like so basically this is a on par the same damn thing.
Yeah, modern Ad Nauseam is doing some incredibly powerful things with these stupidly good spells. Like it's just, the interaction is so powerful. Like I play 2 cards and I draw my entire library. Nothing else is really doing that in modern. Maybe not Legacy. I don't know, but it's a very powerful deck. Like you're playing strictly better Force of Will a lot of the time. You're playing Spoils, which is like banned essentially in Legacy. Like like what we were just talking about. The deck can win at any time it wants, literally at the drop of a hat. Like, oh, your Field of Ruining my land. Oh, you're casting Archmage's Charm to draw 2 cards. Okay, I'm gonna win now. You know what I mean? Like, it's very good like that. So, yeah, definitely. Back to what we were talking about. Underrated card, definitely Spoils.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, in terms of combo decks, why play this deck over, say, Dredge? Why play it over Amulet Titan or any of those Titan ramp decks, or even Storm?
So, if you're considering playing Dredge because you think Dredge is good in the meta, consider that Ad Nauseam is really good against Dredge, right? So, let's talk about the specific metagame. So, Red-Green Ponza is really good right now. Eldrazi Tron is really good right now. Ad Nauseam has a very decent Red-Green Ponza matchup. What's good against those decks? Well, Burn is a fine choice. Dredge is a fine choice. We're good against those. I guess I would play Ad Nauseam over those other decks because it has typically good matchups against those decks and the decks that they are trying to prey upon, maybe. It's just a deck that's very resilient to combat damage. It just thrives in a unknown, versatile, untuned meta, something like. Yeah, you can get away with a lot when you play this deck, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
So, Leslie, what do you think this? What kind of person is this deck for?
All right, so this deck is so gas. Like, if you love going all in, if you're the kind of poker player that pushes your chips in, you know what I mean? This is for you. Like, when you play Spoils of the Vault and you're like, all right, I either lose the game or I win the game. Like you're all in. Like, this is a very all in type of deck. The deck is great TV. It's like, I just need to top deck the card right here and I've got it. But you can say that for like 4 turns in a row because of the nature of like Angel's Grace and Phyrexian Unlife to just buy yourself a ton of turns. Like, I don't know. It just feels like every turn you're like, either I get it or I don't. I get it or I don't. And I love that. It's it's a good combo deck that's very resilient and it makes for some really exciting gameplay when you get into playing the deck.
I imagine at a high level, it might also be for the more mathy people who are interested in combinatorics and statistics of like grinding 1 extra card deeper or sequencing the spells to maximize how do I put it? Like
the amount of cards you see and the amount of turns you get. Exactly. Yeah. Like sequencing cards to make your life total stretch, I guess, is really important. A common scenario that comes up against Dredge is I could play my Phyrexian Unlife on turn 3, but I could also take a turn because I don't have the combo in hand. I can take a turn off Angel's Grace, which is like less mana efficient, but then on my turn, play the Phyrexian Unlife, which that buys me a whole nother turn. That sees me another card, even though it's like kind of counterintuitive, like it's not mana efficient, etc. It can buy you a whole nother turn because once your life total goes below 0 or 0 or less, Angel's Grace doesn't really have text anymore. So things like that, which can be kind of counterintuitive, can really, it's exactly as you said, how to like calculate when it's correct to spoils, how likely am I to win with these plays. Since you don't have to think about blockers or anything like that, you have a lot of time to focus on those other things. Yeah, so
And
definitely.
have your hypergeometric calculator ready for that spoils.
Absolutely.
You never know. You never know. I most certainly have never reached for a hypergeometric calculator playing Merfolk.
Well said. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into some questions.
Absolutely.
We're gonna go. I'll start from the top. Hopefully, everyone who gave a question is still here. Here's a great question. Gills to Pay the Bill says, "Did you play it while it was not as good?" So basically, the 2017 to 2019 era.
Yeah, I played against it. I played it when Humans was a deck. I don't know. I fell in love. You know what I mean?
Right. I know. I most
if it
certainly
was
do know what you mean.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's good. You make it good, right? So I've had my fair share of human matchups. Like I remember going to GPs and like being like, you know, on a heater, and then it's just like Humans comes around. It's like, oh no.
Right.
That happens a lot less now. But yeah, this is definitely a labor of love. I did play it when it wasn't good, but like you said, Nikachu, we have our reasons.
And you know what? I love that you're not the first person to how do I put this? Like to be devoted to your deck, and then it gets well positioned. Like you never know when the deck is going to become well positioned again for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
The meta can shift for a million reasons. For new cards getting printed, cards get banned, card gets unbanned, and now you're in perfect position. You've got all the experience to obliterate everybody, and you're proving it right now for the last who knows how many months.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is people don't always play the best deck. They play the most popular deck, right? Because that's just how gaming works. And to be honest, the really fun decks we kind of have good matchups against. Like Red Green Panza has always been popular because, you know, everybody loves Blood Moon and like blowing up lands. You know what I mean? And we tend to do pretty well in that matchup. So the most fun decks we have good matchups, and like the good decks, except for Eldrazi Tron, we have good matchups against as well. So,
Mr. Blue says, "How is Ad Nauseam's matchup against Merfolk?"
All right, great. So I thought about this because I knew I was going here, and I knew this would come up.
Yeah,
so,
some Merfolk player is going to ask this.
Yeah. So Merfolk does not present a clock that is fast enough to consistently kill on turn 4. But they do have interaction in terms of force negation and deprive or spell pierce occasionally. So when I sideboard, I do not bring in creature removal. I do not bring in wraths. I do not bring in creature hate of any kind. I just bring in Pact of Negations and maybe 1 or 2 Veil of Summers for that. We kind of just ignore the clock that Merfolk presents because it's like it can't kill on turn 3, probably can't kill on turn 4. And I just focus on having ways to beat the counter spells, which is good because if a Merfolk player keeps a hand with a lot of counter spells, then they're not going to have a clock at all, really, to a degree. Like if you have like Mutavault, Aethervial. I'm not a Merfolk person, but like if you're swinging with Mutavaults, you're not leaving up mana to counter spells, right?
That's right.
The idea. So it usually shakes out pretty well for Ad Nauseam. Also, we have no islands, and one thing that I love about this matchup now is we play a 1/3 Merfolk. So when you play a Lord of Atlantis, now I've got a 2/4 blocker.
That's right.
And that can sit
awkward.
in front of a Silvergill all day. So it works. The matchup is really interesting to that fact. Like typically against blue interactive strategies, I want to go lower on my Thassa's Oracle, but heck no, not when I'm playing against fish, you know? So that's pretty much what I would say. I would call it a good matchup because the clock is not as aggressive compared to like Dredge, for example, or Burn. And the interaction is sparse enough to where 1, maybe 2 Pact of Negation can push the combo through. So that's the matchup there.
A lot of people ask me, what's my matchup against Ad Nauseam? And I said, a lot depends on how much interaction I have. If I can bring in like 8 sideboard cards, great. If I have nothing, I'm screwed. Because I know that you are packing a lot of interaction to back up your combo. So if I have like 1 piece of interaction, I'm like totally dead. Because the clock is pretty slow, unless we're playing like Simic or something. But generally, yeah, we're not a turn 4 deck. JK Torborg says, do we need to focus less on beating control as a combo deck now that snow control is dead? Or is everyone that played snow just going to go to blue-white?
Great. So that's a really good question. I don't actually have the answer. What we really just need to let the meta shake out.
Yeah.
And the thing is about control decks is control decks need time to be tuned to be a particular meta, right? Like you can't just like, is Spell Snare good right now? You know what I mean?
We just got to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So a control deck needs time to like brew and stew and like get tuned. So until that happens, we don't really know what we're going to face. So you're going to see a lot of different kinds of control decks right now. The good news is you're not going to see as many, right? Because people are going to, especially at higher level higher level events like the Modern Super on Sunday, it's just, I mean, unless you're a diehard control person, it's not a good choice right now, in my opinion. You need to see what's going to happen, etc. So I guess the answer is yes, we don't need to focus on it so much because there's going to be less of it. But maybe in like a week or so, we're going to want to, have this conversation again. You know what I mean? That's my answer.
So Jen Decide says they got their first 5-0 yesterday with Loris Rock, and they beat Ad Nauseam round 2 off of the back of Collector Oof. How would you rate this card in the matchup?
Great. So Collector Oof is a very good card against Ad Nauseam because it stops Ad Naus from winning on turn 4, basically. So in order for Ad Nauseam to win on turn 4, it needs some amount of mana acceleration because we have 5 or 6 mana of spells to cast on our 4th turn, right? So Collector Oof turns off those mana rocks. And it's a 2/2. What's this card? This card is Disruption along with some amount of pressure, which again is like the way you beat Ad Nauseam. So I would say Collector Oof is definitely a good card to bring in against Naus. If you have it in your sideboard, you should be bringing it in. That's basically it. Yeah.
101 next says, is there any major difference or advantage between Ad Nauseam and Neobrand?
Great. So Neobrand folds instantly to a Force Negation, or like the deck really does go all in, but it can still whiff, right? Ad Nauseam goes all in, but it doesn't whiff. That's the biggest difference in my mind. So it also can recover if things go wrong. Neobrand is like, it's a one pump chump, like it goes all in, and then if it doesn't go right, it just falls apart. So Ad Nauseam, like there's a lot more flexibility with your cards, and you can wait a little bit longer to set everything up to go off. So I think I don't know. I'm thinking of Final Nub right now, like him watching this, but I think Ad Nauseam is better, honestly. If we were going to choose, I would choose Ad Nauseam. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but yeah.
So where am I with the questions? Hold on. I don't know if this is a question, but I'll read it. To the Merfolk and Ad Nauseam Masters, I have a buddy who loves Ad Nauseam. He says that Kira Great Glass Spinner and a land in hand is a great way to counter Lightning Storm win con. If Ad Nauseam is a consistent, although not overwhelming presence in the meta as a fish player, is it worth saving a slot for Kira in my sideboard, taking into account that she doesn't stop Oracle, but may get some residual value against Gend or other removal decks? Are you familiar with the Kira trick?
Yes, I am familiar with the Kira trick, but I would advise against it. Like, I don't think it's strong enough right now. It's like bringing in Leyline of Sanctity. We just win with Oracle, and I feel like Asker knows that. So the only time Lightning Storm really shines is when you have to win at instant speed. So like on your turn, for example.
Actually, yeah, like it's like impossible now for you. You will always have almost always have 2 Simian Spirit Guides and a Pentad Prism to cast Thassa's Oracle. Because there were some times where you're just tight on mana, and now the only thing you can cast, sometimes the only thing that you can cast would be what's it called?
Lightning Storm.
Lightning Storm after you Ad Nauseam. I would just add this. I actually don't believe in this. I think the Kira trick only works against inexperienced Ad Nauseam players. For example, like I Kira tricked one person before. They drew their whole deck. They lightning stormed. I countered it. And it's like really weird. You gotta have to like have a vial on 3 in play and vial it in, because otherwise it's already on the battlefield. And they, well, okay, whatever. Let's say I counter lightning storm. The game's not actually over.
Right.
Even though I've got a lot of Ad Nauseam players scooped to me here, they can go to their upkeep with no cards in deck, Angel's Grace, take their turn, play Laboratory Mania, because it was in their hand. And their hand is full of counter spells, by the way, at this point. Right? They got the whole deck. They sculpted their hand perfectly, and then they just draw a card and win. So, like, the Cure trick just doesn't work. Like, it should actually never work. It is literally a trick.
Yeah. Veil of Summer also works against the Kira trick, because Veil of Summer says your spells can't be countered this turn. So if you have 4 mana, your opponent Kira tricks your Lightning Storm, you just Veil in response, and it does nothing. So I would definitely say it is not a powerful enough card at this point.
Yeah, so I would definitely not have it in the sideboard for Ad Nauseam alone. I'm going to skip a million questions to get this one, because this one's a really exciting one. How do you win the mirror? Is it whoever has the most Angel's Graces?
Okay, so yes and no. So so game 1 it's a crapshoot. If you have 4 Angel's Graces in your hand, you probably win the game, because in the mirror you want to use Thassa's Oracle. As Lightning Storm, gets shut off by Phyrexian on life. So if you just have more Angel's Graces than they do Thassa's Oracle, and the number for Oracle is like 3, then you're going to win the game. So game 1, yes, definitely.
How does it work? Let me know. I'm still not grasping this.
Sure. So,
how do you win at all?
So you play Thassa's Oracle with 0 cards in your deck.
Okay.
Win the game. If you respond to the trigger with Angel's Grace, the trigger just kind of fizzles, right? So then you take another turn and you try it again. So it's important to note that you only need to have 2 or less cards in your library to win with Oracle. Yep. So when you Ad Nauseam combo, pick up all but 2 cards in your deck. Play an Oracle. Do you have the Grace? If yes, go to your next turn. Play Oracle. Grace? And then you do that like 3 times. And then if you don't win, you lose, because you have no cards in your deck and you have no one to win the game. So that's why in game 1, having a bunch of Angel's Graces is the key to beating the mirror. But game 2, you bring in Thoughtseize. So now, let's say I Thoughtseize you. Let's say Nikachu's playing the mirror. So I Thoughtseize you. You show me. Now you have a choice. If you have 1 Angel's Grace, you need to play it immediately, or else I'm going to take it from you and win the game. Let's say, so you play it, and then I don't have to play my Oracle. I can just pass because you've played the Grace already. Let's say you have 2 Angel's Graces. You play it, I take the second one. Now I have 3 Oracles, and you only have 2 Angel's Graces left.
So you can grind out my Angel's Graces.
Yeah, exactly. So Thoughtseize changes the dynamic of that matchup. So in games 2 and 3, whoever picks up their library first wins the game. And that plays more like a traditional mirror. But game 1, you can just cheese people out by like I will blind spoils for Angel's Grace just to get 3 of them in my hand game 1. Like, it's that good. But yeah, that's basically how the mirror plays out in a very broad nutshell kind of sense.
But there is actually some play to it. It's not like some random Simian Spirit Guides attacking each other.
Simian Spirit Guides, Simian Spirit Guide beats are like the Stone Age. Like we're playing cards in 2020. Okay, like what if I told you we had main deck 1/3s? How does your 2/2 beats look now? It's totally different. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
How would you rank the different win conditions, and which do you prefer to play main deck?
So Lightning Storm is probably better, but it's strictly more clicks in Moto. So I typically prefer Oracle. They aren't totally different. As cards, Oracle is a better card, but as a way to win the game, Lightning Storm has the most amount of flexibility. It's in paper, it's the plan A, and Oracle is the plan B. On Moto, you see a lot more Oracle just because it's easy to click through. So yeah.
Mikey J says, is Forza Vigor effective against this deck?
I would say yes. Any 0 mana interaction can be problematic for Ad Nauseam, but to that point, it's probably I mean, like if you're playing it after I've picked up my library, it's no good anymore. It does cost another card in your hand, so that can be okay. The thing about Force Negation is I've gone all in and you've countered my spell.
Yeah.
Now I'm Force Vigor, it's more like you've slowed me down a turn or two. You know what I mean? It's a card that I want to counter if I'm going all in, but if I'm not going all in, it's not great. So it can be okay. I haven't seen much of it in the meta. I don't typically worry about it. But yeah, it's a fine card to bring in for sure.
Gills to Pay the Bill says, what is some neat tech that you have used in certain metas? Merfolk has, for example, played things like Peak, Fairy Conclave, and Cryptic Command. So is there like any niche Ad Nauseam, some pet Ad Nauseam cards that you've used?
All right, so Death Shadow kind of drove me off the deep end.
Okay.
I tried Banefire against Death Shadow because it cannot be countered if X is 5 or greater. So Death Shadow would go low, and then I would Banefire them. And I've actually won exactly one game with Banefire in Ad Nauseam. I have played
cast this thing.
So
you
the
build
deck
up the mana?
Yeah, the deck generates like 6 mana on 4. So you can Banefire for 5 on turn 4 at the least. So there's that. I found something much better that could even be good right now, honestly. Probably, definitely not. But, you know, I'll say it could be to make it exciting. Avatar. Oh, how's the card? What's the card? I can't even think of a...
What does it do?
It makes all creatures 1/1s, and it has flying. Oh, what is it called? Divinity, Godhead of Awe. Godhead of Awe is what it is. Godhead, one word. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So this card is super
never heard of this
spicy.
card.
So it's a 5-mana 4/4 flying, which slaps, and then it makes all other creatures 1/1s. So now you're 13/13. You're negative 13/13 Death Shadow or whatever it is. No, your 13/13 Death Shadow becomes a 1/1, and then as long as you have 1 life, your Death Shadow is going to die. It makes your Gurmag Anglers into 1/1s, but also it makes your Reality Smashers into 1/1s. It makes your Prime Times into 1/1s. So all these decks that play big battle cruiser creatures just get shrunk down to size. And like the really fun part about this card is its devotion to blue is 5. So if you play a Thassa's Oracle for value, you're looking at the top 7 cards of your deck, which is just hilarious. So if Eldrazi Tron becomes like, I don't know, like 15, 20%, like 20+% of the meta, I will be playing this card again because it is good.
I'm getting interested in this card.
Yeah,
in theory, I can play all other creatures are 1/1s. This is very
but they
interesting.
get buffed by lords, right?
Yeah, so who cares? And look at that devotion. This with Master of Waves, or just instantly turn on Thassa. This is very interesting.
Yeah, it's a sweet card.
I did not know this card existed. And for 5 mana, hey, it's a price to pay, but like it turns everything else useless. Have you ever considered Index?
Right. So
for this deck, what is that?
Like,
I get it.
Look at the top 5
cards.
So Index is not it's not good enough in my opinion because it doesn't draw a card. A lot of this deck it's a 2-card combo and you need 6 mana, and that requires quite a few cards to pull off. So all of our cantrips replace themselves, which gives us like the fuel to do what we want. Index makes us go down a card, so I don't think it's valuable enough. I mean, it's interesting. I'd never considered it honestly until this moment, but I'm gonna you need cards to do things, and this is basically like a mulligan to 5 or like 6.
Yeah.
Honestly. I'm not about it. No.
Everything must draw cards. Balada asks, what is the best way to interact with Ad Nauseam for a red-green deck?
All right, that's a really good question. So red-green relies on Ad Nauseam can beat a Blood Moon. So Ad Nauseam is playing Lotus Bloom and Pentad Prism.
Yeah, you have all the mana.
Those cards, generate any color of mana, really. So the best way to interact with Ad Nauseam is to blow up artifacts or play Collector Oof. I don't really want to say it because I'm trying to win games on Sunday, but Collector Oof is really good against Ad Nauseam. Magus is great because Magus is, it's the pressure plus the disruption, right? And that's like,
Okay.
I really want to drive that home. If you're trying to beat this deck, you need pressure and disruption. Like Bloodbraid Elf cascading into Stone Rain, that's nuts. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Sweet.
Interacting with the artifacts.
Betamax asks, should an opponent board in Chalice of the Void against Ad Nauseam?
That really depends on the deck. If a lot of decks will have dead cards against Ad Nauseam because it plays no creatures. So if you're boarding out like creature hate, like if you have an excess of cards to take out, Chalice is great. Chalice is like very good against Ad Nauseam. Most decks played in the main board, so I would assume that. But yeah, the card gives Ad Naus a hard time. Yeah, it's a good card to bring in.
Is Karn the Great Creator good against Ad Nauseam?
Yes, I hate this card. It is absurd.
A lot of people hate this card.
Yeah. Oh my God. I hated War of the Spark. I think I lay in bed at night and I think about these Planeswalkers, but yes, it's very good because again, we're a turn 4 combo deck. To get a win on turn 4, we need mana ramp in the form of Pentad Prism, Lotus Bloom, or to a lesser extent, Simian Spirit Guide. Karn makes those artifacts useless, so we can't win on turn 4. If you can start blowing up my lands, I'm not going to get to the 5-6 mana I need naturally. So yes, I think it is a good card against Ad Naus. A little slow, but good.
What do you think about the new meta in Modern right now?
I don't think the meta is here yet. I think that until we find the best control deck, until we feel the shoes that Astrolabe left for us, we're not going to really see a new meta. But right now, I'm ready to go. I mean, Burn is popular in a unsolved meta. An unsolved meta is always a treat for Ad Nauseam because decks aren't tuned and people play linear decks that don't have to worry about what the meta is, I guess. So when you're not worrying about what the meta is and you're just playing whatever aggressive deck you can, like I'm over here ready to go. Like
it's funny. This is the opposite for me. In an untuned meta, I have no idea what the hell I'm facing, so I have no idea what toolbox cards I have to use. So my deck sucks. And then once it gets tuned, okay, now I know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny how that goes. Like Ad Nauseam is a deck that changes. Like there's like 3 or 4 cards in the main board you can fiddle around with, and like like 8 cards in the sideboard, not even like 6 cards in the sideboard that you can mess around with. The deck really doesn't change much at all. So yeah.
This actually says the strength of Ad Nauseam right now. Even Sodek has been playing Ad Nauseam recently, and his Modern 5-0s, and he's basically the Dredge guy. So he's like putting Dredge to the side, even though Dredge is actually in a pretty good spot too, and is playing Ad Nauseam because he just thinks it's that damn good right now.
Yeah, and yeah, the Sodek is definitely the Dredge guy, and like I've said before, he's a smart guy, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that Ad Nauseam slaps right now. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Here's a great question. Okay, so I mean, I know the answer to this. Are you allowed to use a hypergeometric calculator at a GP?
I have no idea.
Well, the answer is no, for sure, because you can't use any outside assistance. But but what I could say is, have you developed any sort of intuition regarding, when you can spoils for a card X deep in your deck or not?
So I don't have
how many.
I don't have no. Well, yes and no. It's more of like a feeling. You know what I mean? Like
some intuition, of course.
In paper, I didn't really like start picking up the hypergeometric calculator until after Paper Magic ended because of COVID. So I haven't had the opportunity to do that. I was thinking about this actually. I don't know. I should create like a cheat sheet or something. Like the biggest thing to know is like if I have like 50 cards in my deck and I play Spoils of the Vault, how likely am I to see a 4 of?
Yeah, you should make your own table that you eventually memorize. That would be a huge boost to the Ad Nauseam community and just strategically as well.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure you can use notes, right? So if you have
you can't. You can use in-game notes. You can refer to outside notes during sideboarding, but you wouldn't be able to refer to outside notes during the game. because you can write down in-game notes. So like, you know, your opponent reveals cards, you can write that down, but you cannot refer to like those sort of notes during the game.
I will say this. I think this is really a good tip to take to heart if you're trying to get better at playing spoils. Think of every life you would lose to spoils as an extra draw step. So if your opponent is dealing more than 1 damage to you per turn on average, you want to spoil sooner than later. If your opponent is not dealing you 1 damage or more per turn on average, like they're playing control, you want to wait with your spoils. Because basically, like if you're taking like 4 or 5 damage a turn from a Goyf or like a couple of Goblin Guides, the sooner you can use that life total you have as a resource to get your Phyrexian Unlife or whatnot, the better off you're going to be, because it's going to be like turn 5, you're going to have 2 life, you're going to have no white card, you're going to have like, you know, only 2 looks. So that's kind of like the feeling part. Like, should I wait on the spoils because I'm under no pressure versus I'm under a lot of pressure? I should try to do this sooner than later. Yeah.
So Tuckstep says, how much have you played against the green stuff? And what he's referring to is Simic Merfolk, which with Commander Speaker and just more 1-drops and a lower curve of lords has increased turn 4 kill.
So not a whole lot, but again, if I'm on the play, I can put an Unlife into play on turn 3. I can Angel's Grease on your turn 4 to get to my turn 4. So it's probably a little more play draw dependent, but I would still say it's a fairly good matchup. Because again, you're not going to have a lot of turn 4s if you have counter spells, and I can beat like 1, maybe 2 counter spells. So yeah, I would say that.
Daedalus Streaming says, you said interaction plus a clock is good against you, so is Death and Taxes good against you?
Yes, Death and Taxes is definitely a tough matchup. Yeah, it's a hard matchup. It is worse than a medium matchup, if that makes sense. I don't say Death and Taxes, I'm never gonna win, but like I say Death and Taxes, this is gonna be a tough game to get through, for sure. Like Tidehowl Sculler is a hell of a Magic card.
How much do you fear Trinisphere or Damping Sphere?
That's a great question. So
Trinisphere hardly sees play.
Yeah,
it's in some Eldrazi sideboards.
So there we go. Sorry, I was plugging in my computer. There are some draws where Trinisphere doesn't even matter. Like Phyrexian Unlife is a 3-mana spell.
Right.
Ad Nauseam is a 5-mana spell. Lightning Storm is a 3-mana spell. You know what I mean? Doesn't really matter. An early Trinisphere can be quite the pain. So but there are some draws where it just doesn't matter. Damping Sphere, similarly, not good in my opinion. Like in some decks, I wouldn't even bring it in because it doesn't tax the first spell I play. So it's not slowing me down in terms of setting up the board. And when I do go off, it's only really adding like 3 mana to the combo. And Thalia does that anyway, right? So it's like basically Thalia without the 2/1 first striking body. And I don't think that's good enough personally. If you have some counter spells, maybe it's good. But because then I have to pay, then it messes up my combo turn because I have to pay extra mana for my counter spells. But typically, no, like we can generate more mana over a couple of turns. 3 extra mana is not a whole lot.
So how about 2 Damping Spheres in play?
2? All right, let me hit you with this, okay? I play Phyrexian Unlife, okay? I pay 0 extra mana. On your turn, I play Ad Nauseam, which is an instant. I spend 0 extra mana. On my turn, in my upkeep, I guess, I play Lightning Storm, kill you, spending 0 extra mana. Like there are situations where Damping Sphere does absolutely nothing. It's gotcha. I don't think it's good enough.
That's a very good point. I had nothing to side in once against an Ad Nauseam opponent, and I sided in 2 Damping Spheres. I drew both of them. I'm like, this probably doesn't work very well, but I drew both of them and ended up taxing. The turn that they tried to go off, they realized that they were getting taxed on both. I didn't even know both of them were taxed. Mr. Merfolk says, on average, with how many counters in hand you try to combo I guess on average, how many counters you want to have in hand when you go off, and how good against you is bouncing Unlife in response to Ad Nauseam. Best case scenario, bouncing Unlife with some counter backup.
So that's really
two questions.
Yeah,
how many
I get
counters?
what he's saying. Yeah. I think that it's really matchup dependent. Like if I'm playing against Dredge or Burn, I want 0 counter spells like all the time. If I'm playing against a control opponent, or their name is Mr. Merfolk, so let's say Merfolk. If I'm playing against Merfolk, I want one counter spell probably. Or assuming they're tapped out, one counter spell should be enough. If they're not tapped out, maybe 2. But I'm going to try to, it really depends on the context of the game at that point. Like if their clock is threatening to kill me, like if you're threatening lethal, then I'm going to go off with one counter spell.
Yep.
And then the second question was, is bouncing Unlife good? And I think it's fine. It's a great way to, it's basically like a counter spell at that point. Like if you have like Echoing Truth on my Phyrexian Unlife, I have to counter that, right? But also I can just play Angel's Grace in response and still go for the win. Yeah. So it's like, okay, it shouldn't be like, if it's your only plan, then you might be in trouble. But against Merfolk, probably one counter spell is good enough for me to go for it. And then bouncing it can work sometimes, but it's pretty easy for me to play around. So yeah.
Mikey J asks, how does the Storm versus Ad Nauseam match work out?
Oh gosh, that is such a slog for both sides because Storm cannot win at instant speed. Ad Nauseam can. So both decks are very like touch and go. Like the Storm opponent, I have won with Grape Shot on the stack. Like if your opponent does not have any blue mana up, that is like green light, go for it. You know what I mean? If you have a pack, if basically for every blue mana source that they have, that's how many packs you want. Kind of. Depending on the hand. A lot of it is contextual.
They can remand, they can...
Yeah. It can get really tough. But games 2 and 3 get a lot better because we have Leyline of Sanctity. We have it not only for Grape Shot, but for Aria of Flame out of the sideboard, and it stops Gifts Ungiven. We also have Veil of Summer, which stops Gifts Ungiven, and their counter spells as well. So it gets better post-board. Blood Moon can sometimes come in from Storm, and that can make things a little interesting because now you're trying to play Veil of Summer against the Blood Moon. Doesn't work out too well typically, but it's a very interesting matchup. It's both players are just very like if you could know what their hand was, the game would be so easy. But there's a lot of unknown factors in play, and that makes the matchup really interesting.
Gotcha. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on to the show, Ryan Duncan. And if anyone wants to go deeper with you with Ad Nauseam, learn Ad Nauseam inside and out, where can they find you?
Great. So I'm on Twitter. I actually have a sideboard guide and a 75 pinned to the top of my Twitter page, and it's at @gr_Duncan, like you see on the screen. And I also stream on Twitch, and I'm probably going to go live right after this interview to play a league. So if you want to follow me on Twitch at @gr_Duncan, right there on Twitch, I'm honestly going to go live until about 4 o'clock and just play some Magic.
This is also the same name on Twitter?
Yep. Twitch and Twitter, same name.
And you can find all that also in the description below. I'll have all those details there, and you can keep up to date with the latest and greatest Ad Nauseam 75. How much does it change, really? How many slots do you feel like are flexible in Ad Nauseam? I know there's been a bit of a change thanks to Thassa's Oracle, but in general, like how much room is there to adjust this deck?
If something big doesn't happen, I mean, the 4th Unlife is sometimes a question, and how many Pact of Negation you play is a question. But to be honest, those cards really just shift around from the main and the sideboard. So there isn't much that changes at all. Kind of also nice too. Makes it really good for the Hive Mind. So we have a Facebook group as well that you could maybe link. And it's really good because like when you only have to figure out, like when you're having a conversation with people, you're not talking to the guy like, oh, I'm the mono blue Merfolk guy, having a conversation about what the right thing to do is with the blue green Merfolk guy. Like we're all playing basically the same deck. So it's really great to have conversations with people that are pretty much on the exact right page. So
Gotcha. So thanks for coming on. It was fantastic.
Absolutely.
If you found that valuable, let us know. Give a like, leave a comment, and go check out Donkin at on Twitch and Twitter. So thank you very much for showing up, and thank you very much everyone for coming on to the Coffee and MTG show. We do this. Where's my brand stuff? We do this Monday. I didn't get any. Just trying to make sure. Okay, good. Where are my banners? We do. If you want to do this, if you want to be part of these shows live, come over here at twitch.tv/Nikachu MTG. We are still doing this Mondays to Fridays, 11 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. Become part of the conversation. Become part of the magic. Grab your cup of coffee. So thank you very much to everyone who showed up today, and I'll see you at the next cup. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.